means that now we had the quick overview of the 11 modules, and this training, which in fact took us for the pilot training, it took us 80 hours. So you had a glimpse in a very few minutes. So maybe I should say a few words before. So as members of the project, we assume that everything was very nice and that we had a wonderful achievement. We were very satisfied with the work done and with the winter school program, and also with the reception of the participants. It was so good for us that we even attended all or nearly all the modules, but opinion is not enough, and we need assessment, of course. And here we come to the presentation of the summer school evaluation by Arcola. Arcola is an independent research organization based in London, which provides research, evaluation, and consultancy services, notably for education and training. And it has an extensive experience in EU-funded programs and has particular expertise in research and evaluation methodology. So Arcola, Joe, and Greg, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marie-Christine. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, sure.
Great. Sorry, Greg, for jumping in, but I wanted to set the scene first for the evaluation. So as Marie-Christine said, we were responsible for the evaluation of the Trail School. I'm going to start off by just presenting what the methodology was, and I'm going to present the results of the quantitative evaluation, and then Greg is going to concentrate on the more interesting results, which are based on the qualitative analysis. So our overall methodology for doing the evaluation is based on realist evaluation and theory driven, and we use what's called a theory of change. What theory of change does, it models and tracks the progress or the journey of trails from the start, the presenting problem it tries to address, to the end of the project, and the change to that problem that the project wants to do. So the presenting problem is the lack of LSP training for both educators and students, and you'll know from the presentation on intellectual output 1 that there are significant needs and gaps in how training is delivered for LSP teachers and students. So connecting this presenting problem with the impacts of trails, which are better trained LSP teachers, a network of centres and teachers in LSP, and ultimately possibly increased employability for educators who have training in LSP. Connecting those two, the problem and the solution, are a number of actions. For example, a review of existing programs and needs analysis. They lead to outputs, particularly the design of the LSP training program and the summer school. The use of those outputs lead to outcomes, improved mobility, increased language, digital and intercultural skills, and in aggregate at the end of the project, the outcomes lead to impacts. So our task and our role in evaluation is to find out what we call the mechanisms, the combination of these outputs, the resources that Trails produced, and how participants in Trails use those resources to change their knowledge, their skills, and their behaviors. And that's what we're interested in the evaluation. So as I said at the beginning, I'm going to concentrate on the quantitative aspect of the evaluation. Putting this theory of change into practice combines quantitative analysis with qualitative, and Greg's going to focus on the qualitative results in the evaluation, which includes things like focus groups and e-portfolios. So I'm going to start with the summative evaluation of the Trails Winter School, and how we did that was to produce a learning self-assessment tool. The self-assessment tool measures the people who participated in the winter school, their self-reported learning outcomes on the course across all the 11 modules. The tool includes 2 questions per module. As you know, there are 11 modules, so there are 22 questions. The first question on the tool is around getting participants to rate their knowledge, their overall level of understanding and knowledge of the topics covered in each of the 11 modules. The second question is a practice question, and it gets the participants to rate their ability to apply this understanding and knowledge in actual teaching and learning practice for LSP. Participants in the school were asked to rate their knowledge and their ability to apply it on a scale of 1 to 5, from low to high. We ran this test at the start of the course and at the end, so we can compare the scores pre-test and post-school, and that gives us an idea of whether the Trails Winter School and the Trails course overall had increased the competences and the knowledge and skills of participants. We had a good response thanks to Greg's work in getting people to take this. The pre-test test we did at the start of the school involved 52 people in total. The partners, our partners who delivered the course, participated, 21 of them. And then we had 2 additional groups of learners, in-service teachers, of which there were 12, and then students. The post-test, we didn't lose many people at all, so we have good comparability across the 2 pre-test and post-tests. This is the main results of our analysis of learning outcomes using this tool. The blue bar shows the average scores for the 3 groups prior to the school, pre-test. The red bar shows the average scores post-test. And it's what you can see naturally for the partners, our partners who delivered the course. You'd expect them to have high levels of knowledge and practice-based skills at the start. And of course, that is shown in the graph. Surprisingly, we found that even partners, even the experts who delivered the course and designed the course, increased their knowledge and practice-based skills at the end of it. And that's interesting because what it suggests is that by collaborating with students and with in-service teachers and amongst each other, they were actually able to increase their learning outcomes themselves. For teachers, there was a significant increase in average test scores between the start of the school and the end of it. And for students, an even bigger increase. So for all participants, which is the last 2 bars you see on the slide, there was significant increases in test scores using the tool. So in answer to the evaluation question, did the course make a significant difference to LSP learning outcomes? The data showed that it certainly did. This table shows the pre-test average score against the post-test average score for the 3 groups. You can see that even the experts, the partners, increased their scores by a factor of about 8. For teachers, they increased their score from 64 to 92, and students increased their score from 51 to 80, which are very substantial gains in learning outcomes. We also looked at whether there were significant variations in test scores across the 11 modules that were delivered to see whether participants found some harder and some easier. Overall, there wasn't much difference in terms of the average assessment scores across the 11 modules. They were all pretty similar, with the exception probably of module 9, where average test scores were slightly less than the others. So to summarize this, our conclusions from this quantitative analysis of learning outcomes were that, firstly, overall, participants' LSP self-assessment scores increased by 28% on average, which is a significant jump. The largest gain was for students, with an increased score of 55%, comparing pre-test and post-test, and for in-service teachers, with an increased score of, on average, 44%. These large learning gains suggest the course is very effective, although it has to be said that they're not statistically significant. We compared the pre-test with the post-test using the students' t-test, and that's probably because there were large variations within the groups rather than indicating that there was no impact. As I've said, students benefited most from the course. They lagged behind in knowledge and practical application at the start, but this gap was really significantly reduced by the end, and that was statistically significant. We didn't find any statistically significant difference in test scores across and between the modules, although the scores for module 9, as I said, were significantly lower. So overall, the quantitative analysis suggests that the winter school was really successful. And I'm going to hand over to Greg to give you more detail now in terms of the qualitative evaluation results that we got.
Hi, everybody. Just one sec whilst I share my screen.
I need to stop share first. Sorry, Greg.
It's okay. Okay, we are running behind time slightly here, so I will move fairly quickly through this. Though there's quite a lot of material on slides here, but I'll talk through it rather than dwell too long. Okay, so as Joe, thanks for that, Joe, and sorry to be over eager a little early on. We used a range of tools, not only through the course of the winter school, but also through the course of the project to collect both quantitative and qualitative data. I'm focusing on the qualitative methodology and tools, what we got from the winter school. So within the winter school itself, in the week, it was only 3 weeks ago now, very recently, I observed all sessions, so there was ongoing observation record throughout the week. Our delivery team in Croatia also provided an online Google document, which participants, there was daily feedback on those from participants, and also within the e-companion that you've heard mentioned already, which was a really significant document that all participants had. Within this, we had structured it so that there was a more structured option for daily feedback from participants too. We call that a daily experience record. At the end of the week, also, the final session after module 11 was an evaluation session when we ran 2 focus groups, one with the partners, Trails partners and trainers, which Joe led, and another with all of the participants that I led, which were great. I mean, so I'm presenting feedback from these various different tools. There has been significant feedback elsewhere as well. Very positive feedback via personal emails and things like that from participants to the various Trails members. So delivery, very briefly, observations of the delivery of the course through the week. So all training sessions, including the technical support from the Croatian team, were interesting, well developed, engaging, and clearly valued by participants. We saw highly engaged participation and delivery throughout the week. And a really noticeable thing was the degree of mutual support that went on and increased as the week progressed, because as Marie-Christine mentioned, I mean, this was COVID has been a challenge to everyone in Europe, but it was a particular challenge to this project and to changing to an online delivery mode. So that was very interesting to observe. As I've already said, participants had good support material, an e-companion, which included a huge amount of material. Throughout the week, though, participants did feedback. There was that they would have really liked plenary material prior to the plenary session deliveries, because there was a huge amount of material presented in some fantastic modules, but that was sometimes they would have liked something that would have allowed them to keep track or keep that. So plenary, group sessions, and the use of breakout rooms and practical working groups worked really well, despite very rare technical issues that were dealt with and resolved satisfactorily and very promptly with coordination from the Croatian team. The structure of the modules was relevant and well planned. It was an intense and really valuable experience. The scope and scale of the material included was enormous. Some paring down occurred in process because of time constraints, etc. And further reduction in volume might be beneficial for future iterations. Okay. Feedback from the opportunity for participants to feedback on a daily basis within their e-companion. So this is a very a summary really of commentaries there. So this was structured. So the questions were structured around what you liked most about participation, about the participation experience on a daily basis, what you liked least about the winter school participation, any problems or challenges that you experienced, and whether these were solved or not, and anything else that you'd like to record. So there was a structure to this. So feedback in general was phenomenally positive. Some students reported feeling slightly overwhelmed at first, but soon really engaged. Expressions of gratitude and fulfillment from all participants, teachers, the in-service teachers in particular, was forthcoming throughout the week. The experience was, I'm failing to see some of this. All right, going back. So, sorry. The experience was not as relevant for two of the participants. This was reported actually in focus groups, with one student indicating that whilst engaged throughout, she had decided that that LSP teaching wasn't for her. Another frequent comment was they know so much. So the participants were blown away by the access to the sort of level of LSP teaching expertise that was available to them through the Trails course. Teacher and student mixing in groups. So this is in-service teachers and current LSP students. So in-service teachers, those actually in practice, and students mixing was considered a generally positive experience from both sides. As I've already mentioned, plenary summary material was requested. There was some valuable critical input, which was encouraged, particularly in the focus groups. So from teachers, there was a comment that perhaps less LGP language for general purposes content would have been relevant, and the specific LSP but would have been preferred. Most of it was LSP, but there was a request or an observation along these lines that perhaps the LGP material could be pared back. But as I've already said, the content was considered to be fantastic nevertheless. Students generally enjoyed the experience, though some of them were slightly overwhelmed at the beginning in particular, and this decreased as the week progressed. Participants were keen to point out their gratitude, and that critical commentary was only given as due to encouragement from myself, for example, and the tools that were provided. So obviously very positive feedback. So I'm not going to read through this. There's too much material here, but there is a slide here basically summarizing or selected out material from the daily Google Drive forms that participants filled in. So you can see words like excellent, intense, very informative, valuable. The workshop was useful and insightful. The last day sessions were well timed, etc. I liked whatever. So again, positive, though there was also very valuable critical input here, critical feedback here too, which, as I've said, they were encouraged to give. So focus groups were actually what the final sessions prior to Mary Christine closing things down, what occurred. It was fairly frantic. We had two very large groups, which is a little unusual for focus groups, but nevertheless, they were very productive. Really valuable, and I can't speak for the partners one though because I wasn't in it, but we saw the presentation at the end of it, meaning myself and the participants, the students and in-service teacher participants. So that was clearly a really productive session with Joe Cullen. The participants focus group feedback was, a summary of it is available here. So what the key initial questions were: what made the winter school attractive to you? What did you hope to get out of participation? So a number of things were put forward here, and this is a summary. So possible collaboration with other LSP experts was a key for everybody. To receive a formal training stroke and a qualification, as you've already seen pointed out in the development of this project, there's very little coherent LSP specific training out there and significant gaps. Some stated that what they hoped to get was to refresh their existing knowledge, to get in touch with teachers, discover other perspectives, experiences, and also future career opportunities. Valuable ideas for thesis development was another item that people pointed out as that they'd got from this week. More in-depth information in the field, of course, and training in LSP. Many indicated that they had not had access to formal LSP specific training prior to this. Outcomes wise, what the participants focus group reported in response to questions: are you likely to apply what you've learned in the Trails Winter School? The responses were: they've learned new ways of teaching, and yes, I'm going to be applying what I've learned. New tools, there were some very interesting tools that were presented to students that they found but they pointed out would be immediately valuable to them. So the community building aspect, networking, both students and the wide range of LSP specialists that they came into contact through the week. The fact that teachers were here to learn and led to the realization that learning is an ongoing process, particularly for students and some of the teachers too. So other comments included brilliant content. For one person, as I've already mentioned, I realized how difficult teaching LSP is. Networking was a significant gain, though a real life, the summer school as it was originally planned would have been preferable for everybody. I've gained more confidence was another comment. Everybody considered the week to have been motivational, providing them with research ideas for those working in that area, and they loved the hands-on approach, particularly the practice lesson design. So additional feedback from the focus group included the connection between theory, research, and practice was excellent overall. Many LSP fields were covered, which was also very much appreciated. The mixture of students and teachers, as I've already mentioned, was a positive. I think for trainers as well as participants, it felt rushed and too ambitious in some places, but generally speaking, I mean, this was a product of basically trying to cram a huge amount of material into a week with the technical issues associated with going online. Time management was also something that was mentioned as an issue, but again, a difficult job, as we're seeing here, trying to cram as much into a final conference a couple of hours as possible. Other suggestions were for smaller groups might have been better on occasion, and again, a request for written material relating to the plenary sessions, in particular the PowerPoints. It was really well organized. Okay, what way do you think this initiative could be improved was the next question that focus groups were presented with. So summary of their responses here: perhaps remove some of the theory pertaining to general language methodology. This was a teacher comment and was not necessarily supported by the students, who were quite quiet on this. Fewer topics, more human contact, more sharing, split into 2 parts was a suggestion for the future, perhaps. I think this was all a reflection on the huge amount of fantastic content. I think people wanted more time really to work with the material that they were presented with throughout the week. And a final comment was that I'd like to have heard a little more talk about the reality of LSP teaching, issues that occur, solutions, and that was it really in terms of focus group feedback. So thank you very much. And I think we should move to questions and answers probably now. And Mary Christine.
Well, questions and answers will be at the end. Now we need a break. Well, thank you very much for all this assessment, which is rather positive, I would say, really positive, in fact. Thank you for the suggestion and ideas. And now we have a break. Well, we are running out of time. We have a 15 minutes break, as it was said in the program. Okay, so we stop there for 15 minutes, right?